Hello, Antonio.
Hello, Nelsie. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And thank you for accepting our invitation to this dialogue between friends.
Well,
It's
thanks to
an
you.
informal dialogue.
Of course.
Uh, and what we would like is to really take the opportunity to share with you your views on the current context, obviously in a general view, because we don't have too much
Much time. Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
but we think that it's important for us as Pressenza and because of our work with
Yes.
information, have a first moment to think and comment something about our context. And we think that you can give us some comments and opinions that for sure are going to be so interesting.
Oh, well, that's very
So
nice.
let's start, okay?
Yep.
We know, all of us know that there are different forces that are influencing change in multilateral relations.
Yes.
And there are some forces that are stronger than others.
Yes.
Obviously, the China and US tension and conflict, and that is one, but we think that is not the only one.
Exactly.
Which are the most significant to you in this moment?
Well, what has given a different factor of play is COVID-19, of course, because COVID-19 has created a series of phenomena without any precedent by putting at risk the lives of practically the whole population of the planet at once. It doesn't mean that we are all going to die, but we are all exposed. And some are more exposed than others, like the elderly. We have seen the bigger majority of victims amongst them, and the poor countries, because they cannot afford vaccines. And so the terrible thing is that when they get ill, they go to hospitals or centers of health attention, and there is nothing they can do for them. And governments have been quite irregular in the way of responding to it. They try in the first place to politicize the reaction and to take advantage of it. And after that, they found that it was a big flop, especially the conservatives and neoliberal governments, for example, Donald Trump, for example, Bolsonaro, for example, Johnson. They start to say that that was a Chinese thing. When China detected that they had the plague, and immediately using all the power of the organization of the state, the discipline of the Communist Party, they blocked completely the cities and every apartment and every individual and all that. And they had the capacity to enforce a system of prevention that really in the end proved to be very effective. But all the others were waffling and exaggerating and say, oh, those are things of the Chinese. I heard the prime minister here saying that, oh, we don't deal with problems in that manner. In the meantime, the number of victims were compound, and they have a terrible record. Now they are doing, of course, royal commissions to investigate the responsibility of the governments and this type of things that get postponed on time. But the interesting thing in my view is that the average human being has been a spectator to this Dantesque, grotesque show of inefficiency, of indifference for the lives of people, of incompetence. And then also we saw incredible forms of solidarity, because countries that were the less expected to be were the ones who ran in support of the others that were most desperate. Even, for example, the first support that the Italians received was from Russia and from China, because nobody here in Europe was able to provide any sort of help. Then in the second stage, they tried to profit with the vaccines. When the vaccines started to be ready and they decided that to risk the massive use of it, then they wanted to do business. So you saw the mentality of the corporations behind trying to take advantage from it. And they were very quick, under the encouragement of the World Health Organization, to liberate those vaccines and not to charge, and to facilitate the poor countries to purchase. But still, there is a huge deficit. There are countries that have not seen vaccines at all. And in South America, for example, is a big problem. In Argentina, I understand that's still a big problem in Ecuador, in Peru, in Brazil. They have started vaccinating, but it's far from being enough. And like that is something that multiplies with different proportions all over the world. And that is unprecedented, but is creating a different dimension, not only to the base of conflict and tensions that exist between superpowers from the economic viewpoint, but also because of the perception of the public about these things that now become much more prominent to them. And the people are putting pressure on the governments, although they cannot move freely at the moment. And many governments are changing the positions. So that proves that the governments have no permanent policies. They are inconsistent in their reactions, and they are not to be trusted. Now the problem is still unfolding, but we don't know what is going to happen in the second act or the third act. So it's like a play, horrible. So in that context, of course, we have seen on the one hand that the global tensions between superpowers has reduced because they could threat with wars, they could move completely out of the place. The situation was very unstable internally. And we don't know exactly what will be the result when we start to count the cost of the whole crisis and the lives of people and all the productive mechanisms that have been completely destroyed. So we don't know really. Maybe something much more horrible will appear. And there is always a chance, because of damage that we are causing to the environment, there is always a chance that this variety of virus could continue changing into others, perhaps more lethal. And so the level of uncertainty doesn't settle yet.
So, Antonio, do you think that the forced relations are changing in this context of the pandemic? Do you think that is changing?
I think because people are believing less in the superstructures, in the grandiosity of the imperial power that the United States is always showing around and threatening and pretending that they have the high horse, that they are the high moral power and with the absolute influence to determine situations. They are not. They are incompetent. They are with very intensive conflicts internally, as they have never appeared before. There are lots of people, formers of opinions and others talking of the possibility of a civil war. Trump is all the time announcing that perhaps he will be back even before what people could imagine. So I can envisage scenarios where you can make an error that can produce a reaction, instant reaction, because the populations are more on edge. And understanding that because of the failure of governments, they have to protest directly. They have to take control of the streets and they have to manifest. And
but
yes.
On the other hand,
yes,
what we can see is that, for example, the health corporations and the technological corporations and all of these kind of actors, it's like if they have now more and more power. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think not necessarily, because those corporations can be dismantled in 1 minute. Even now, they are talking of the G7 is meeting here in England, in Cornwall, in 2 or 3 days' time, and so they are going to discuss some token measure that they are about to agree of charging a tax to the biggest corporations in the world of type of Amazon or Google or people like that. They have been evading taxes because they locate the tax offices where it's convenient for them, and then the rest they are for free. And with that tax that they are collecting, that in the beginning we're talking of 20%, now apparently they are settling in 10%. In the end will be like demonstration effect. But to me, it shows that the powers, the established power, the state power, is ready to take action against corporation if required. Because what you are mentioning is true. At one point, we will have the confrontation between the corporations, that is the underground power, the hidden power that manipulates the state, and the established government in the nation states that will have to take action because the people are furious. And that could fuel conflicts that we cannot envisage, but perhaps more in the internal level of countries than international conflicts.
Okay. Okay. Now, Antonio, let's talk about the global South.
Yes.
How do you see all this global South? What do you think about the situation here in Latin America and the Caribbean and Africa and South Asia? What do you think about our position in all these contexts?
Well, I think South America at the moment, there is a possibility that Lula will return into power next year. I mean, people in Brazil, that is the most powerful country in Latin America, they are changing completely the view in terms of supporting Bolsonaro. And that, of course, it could rebalance the situation of power in Latin America. But on the other hand, we have the problem that all the models of government that have been tried have been terribly incompetent, and people are left behind. The populist ones, the Peronistas, have not been able to feed the population, to create employment, to give the supply, the basic human rights to people, and the country is becoming behind. The same thing happened in Chile. Those multimillionaires concentrated all the resources of the country, and we are preaching here and there that the Chilean model, I don't know what, they had that incredible social explosion, and people went to the streets and in a non-violent way, and they were consistent, and they resisted the physical violence that the government exercised, and in the end they prevailed. The people prevailed. And the demands basically to change the fundamental law of the country under which the neoliberals could do whatever they wanted with the economy, like privatizing the water, for example, that is a monstrosity. That constitution is going to be changed. And that is something that we, the humanists, have been pushing for since the end of Pinochet government. So it's very rewarding to us, because we were not the ones who are rewriting the constitution, but the ideas that we have been preaching show how coherent they were and how correct. And people finally realize that and move in that direction. Then I know that to globalize the situations of Latin America is difficult, because there are lots of particularities. But what I see as a common factor is that people are becoming much more sensible to what they want. For example, the election in Peru that we were talking before, what they have in common, the two candidates, and they are both populists. So populists come with some slogans normally to tell the people, we are for you and we understand your suffering and we are going to fulfill your demands. So both with the same message. Why? Because understand that people are completely fed up and people are very clear in their minds what they want to do. So it's not more a divide between rights and lefts. It's not that. They are the fundamental needs of the people that have to be met. I doubt that either of them has any capacity to fulfill in the case of Peru. But the same thing happens in many countries. So it is possible that people are going to look for alternatives or directly come forward and form governments of coalition or from groups representative of the social base that are not the traditional political groups. It's possible, a reorganization of the whole political spectrum.
And what do you think about, for example, Africa as a region or a country as India?
Yeah, Africa is a different kettle of fish. Yeah, in Africa is a continent that is going through lots of very fast changes and very positive changes. At the moment, there are about 1.5 billion people, but it's the only country, the only continent in the world that is growing at a normal speed. And they estimate that in 30 years' time, they will have about 2.5 billion people. And according to the African Development Bank, one of those banks of the General Financial Institute, but they collect data that's more or less down to earth, because they provide development loans to the countries, the advancement in infrastructure, the levels of education of the people in general, the following of the law and order, the respect for the institutional order that is fundamental for the country to get their act together, the levels of education, the levels of people, young people in universities, etc. It's very positive indicator. So it seems to be a continent that found its way and is on the way forward to development. And there is another observation aspect regarding Africa, that is, for example, that the European countries are not growing, the populations are not growing. I have the viewpoint when I try to understand processes, that the creators of wealth are we, the human beings, not the states, not the corporations, not the governments, none of that. And when we see that the growth of the population in Europe is practically zero. If you see Germany, 0 point something, and they estimate that in 30 years' time, the population will have become so old that they will not have enough hands at work to keep all the production apparatus working, even to feed the pensioners and the people that we are out of work. And they estimate that they will have to import from Africa about 70 million people to take all those tasks.
Wow.
I think this is an indicator first of those positive forces in Africa, the interest that all these other guys have in Africa to succeed and to develop. They think in terms of workforce, but people capable to take over from them. Otherwise, I don't know what will happen. Will be big crisis in all Europe with all systems of government, and all institutions, etc. So there is something quite special in the African example, and probably will be models that can also be taken in some perspectives by Latin America.
Okay, Antonio, we can see how many, or no, I don't know if many, but some conflicts that are historical conflicts are continue. It seems like they are no solution for them. What do you think about this, and which conflicts do you think that are the most important to solve? I know that all the conflicts are important.
Yes,
Even in Africa, we have some.
We have Congo, basically, that was terrible. Had to suffer a colonialism horrible from Belgium, etc.
Yes, but we know that there are some conflicts that is like affect that, like if they affect all of us or all a big region. Yes. What do you think about this?
Well, I think the conflicts in the Middle East, and you know that it's a very sensitive area because of the capacity to produce fuel. That has been also the point of relation between East and West, and that it has been for a long time. And I think China and Russia have a very solidly expressed strategic interest there. And they have at this stage a very strong military and an economic alliance with China. So they have the power to compensate and rebalance if it goes out of the place. And of course, they are also pushing for the settlement of the situation in Iran. At the moment, it looks that they are going to sit on the table and the Americans are going back to the agreement and they say in Iran, and it's possible to progress its matter. So it will be reduced, the pretext and the tensions in Israel. And there is a change of government or imminent in Israel. That tonight, in fact, they have to vote if the new coalition can be accepted. And that will open up like a new possibility, because Netanyahu, with his mentality, and Likud party that is a very obsolete, ultra-conservative, I mean, they are not helping the solution of the problem. They are dragging the feet. And I think there is a possibility of an opening, especially if the Americans start to put pressure, and there is also Russia and China. That means the Security Council of the United Nations demands enforcement of the agreement of returning lands and establish the two-state agreements, as has been endorsed, I mean, many years back. And so there is a hope. And the third conflict that I think is very urgent is the conflict in Yemen. Yemen is being fueled by the arm industry of the United States and the security industry and the United Kingdom, where they are partners in equal parts. And they provide the weapons to the Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia puts pilots that are trained all the time. There is a big contingent of personnel providing services, they say, from the British Armed Forces, the security services here in the United States, and keeping the fighting ability against Yemen. But that has already cost 250,000 lives of children, of family, etc. So I think that conflicts need to settle. And I suspect that in the growing relationship economically, etc., between Asia and Europe, that are moving into the integration economically, recreating the Silk Road. And they have so many contacts amongst them that we are not realizing that the number of trains with merchandise that move from China to Europe is about 20,000 per year. They have grown in 50% in a matter of 1 year. They move more merchandise and containers by land. They have 4 different channels across Asia, and from Japan as well. So really, Eurasia is becoming, as it should have been for a long, long time, one. The gas and petroleum and oil is coming from Russia, and they have accepted now the pipelines. And before they were saying that that the Americans were going to object, they ignore them, and then everything is working properly. So we are in front of a new phenomenon of integration and a new rebalancing of power between the big nations. India is caught in the middle, but the needs of development of India has to be quite similar to the rest of Asian countries. And in that sense, India knows who its real partners are going to be. And as a result of all this, what happens is that even territorially, the United States and Australia are going to remain islands. May not happen tomorrow or next week, but in the next 10, 15, 20 years, that in historical terms is nothing, I think that is going to happen. And they will have to come back to the table and play like decent players. They are not the imperial power anymore. They will have to integrate and see which will be the share and in which way they are going to play with all the rest. So we have a multilateral system with a balance of social forces, but the big problems have to be solved. Poverty and concentration of capital in the hands of a few is obscene, and that cannot be tolerated anymore.
Okay. Antonio, which are the forces of the future?
I think is the universal human nation. I think that is happening de facto. I think people are aware that they are sharing the same type of situations. This integration economically and otherwise that I was just mentioning means that the races and cultures are going to become closer together. In 2 generations' time, the children of our children will be a mix of colors and a mix of cultures and a mix of all the rest. And because of the geographical integration, all the other things will have to come as a result. Education will be quite homogeneous and culture will be quite homogeneous. Keeping differences is not going to have one fits all.
Yes.
But people will understand that the difference is also common, because what we will have in common is what we are sharing as human beings. And then the perspective, the attention will be placed to other type of factors. And I think in that context, if the message of new humanism can be heard properly, will represent the point of reference around which the new way of thinking on looking at this new historical moment will be integrated. And well, that will depend a lot. The onus is on us. We'll have to make our contribution in this new world that is coming, that is already, we can touch it, we can feel it.
Okay. The last question,
Yeah.
because in this context is an important question. It's about the role of science and the new horizons that it opens up. We can feel during this year and a half how
Definitely.
the science could be the most or the worst.
Exactly.
But we think that in fact science is so important for our future, our new horizons.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. What do you think about it? What do you think about the role of the science and which perspective, or what can we do about this?
I agree with you that the demands of people in terms of what is the fulfillment of one of the fundamental human rights, that is the right to health. And as we have seen it, I mean, in front of our eyes during the pandemic, will demand a reorientation of prevention, of care, and basic assistance from everywhere and for every single human being. So at least medical sciences will have to move in that direction. Mm-hmm. And then artificial intelligence is also progressing very fast and is instrumental for most processes of production, but at the same time can be intentionally placed to the service of human beings, of the populations that have been left behind, that then in a very short period of time, they will be able to catch up with the rest. And so that is one of the things that we have to push for in different parts of the world. And there is a dimension of science that is, of course, the one that interests the Americans, and that the Russians are also doing, and the Chinese as well, is the conquer of space. Very quickly, the big corporations, the Amazons of this world, etc., they are investing in there in order to sell big contracts to the American state and to the nation states. They signed those multi-million contracts that before was occupied by the production and sale of weapons. But because war is becoming a bit obsolete in this new landscape that we can perceive, mm-hmm. And if there are no wars, they will not be able to sell weapons. And if they cannot sell weapons, all that established of the corporations will have no business. So they are jumping very quickly into something that nobody knows how much it can cost. That is those travels, galactic travels, that probably are not within the most urgent matters in the world. So we have to consult the people if for them it's extremely important that Bezos or the other guy from us, Tesla cars, or all these, I mean, are traveling to the galaxies. I mean, I personally don't care very much about the galaxies. It's that going to the moon and coming back to the moon will take how many years will take? And what are they going to do? They will take minerals from the moon and bring them here. It's a bit, it's a gimmick, it's a bit nonsensical at this stage. And given the conditions that we have to face and the real problems that we are facing.
Okay, Antonio, thank you very much.
Plenty of time to go to the stars.
Thank you very much, Antonio.
A pleasure.
This dialogue is going to be so useful for us.
I hope.
And you are invited to our meeting in Pressenza, so
Great.
we will see soon, okay?
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much to you.